Welcome to the Bicep community call for August. Very happy to see all of you guys here. Here's our team. I feel like everyone has seen this slide multiple times, so I'll move on to our maintainers, who we are super, super happy to have and very, very appreciative of and grateful for. What is the community call for? It's for you guys, get updates on topics that we may not cover in our own calls. Please be active in Q&A. This is a time for you guys to be able to speak your mind, come off mute and talk to our team. Please use the chat. We have our whole team, pretty much our whole team here, answering questions anytime. If you have any direct questions, you can raise your hand. And we have a Q&A at the end for more direct talking. Yeah, so we recently, we've been working on our 0.10 release, and that will be released at the start of next month, so around September 1st. And I'm not sure if we have mentioned this previously, but we've been working towards a new monthly release system. And we have a project-based system on GitHub, so every release is every month, and now you can know when the release will be versus sometimes we would push things back by a couple of months, and this is just a lot more straightforward. All right, Alex, do you want to take the slide?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So for 0.10, which should be out by September 1st, we are finally releasing the Visual Studio extension for Bicep, which we're pretty excited about. So that is going to have all of basically the language service ported over. So that's all the kind of basic IntelliSense and validation that you're used to. It will not have features like Bicep deploy and some of those like more VS Code specific things. We're exploring what's the most efficient way to port those over. Our intention is to get everything over to Visual Studio. That's kind of reasonably possible, but don't have all the details on that yet. Excuse me. All the relevant ARM TTK rules are now ported over to the Bicep linter. So if you're using the TTK today, as of the 0.10 release, you should be able to move entirely over to the Bicep linter. There are some TTK rules that are more specific to the ARM template syntax itself that didn't make sense to port over. But everything that does make sense has been moved over as of this release. So if you notice anything that you still are dependent on the TTK for, please do let us know. We are particularly interested in that. Lambda expressions, this was something that Anthony demoed in the last community call. So we kind of like flipped the bit and enabled this. This is now rolled out everywhere. So in the 0.10 release, you will get support for the Lambda expressions, and those should work on your actual deployments. So please do give those a try and let us know if those are working or not working as expected, and then all the usual sort of bug fixes. Okay, so for future releases, the next one is going to be 0.11, obviously. We're working on a bunch of decompile workflow improvements. So there, for example, there's an issue, paste as Bicep, where you can copy JSON code from an ARM template and paste it as Bicep. We're looking at those types of things, or like right-click decompile, things to just make the decompile and conversion process easier. That's something that came out of a lot of the research calls. If you were on the Doc Talk calls, we talked about those a lot, and so we prioritized that work as a result. This is optimistic, but we are optimistically saying that we think we'll have custom type support in 0.11. So this is to, instead of having a generic object parameter, to be able to have something more specific with more requirements, like a set of allowed properties or required properties in an object, and what allowed values those specific properties have. So the type support that you're used to getting for a resource, you'll be able to kind of replicate a lot of that in your parameters themselves. we'll have more to kind of share about what that is going to look like and what the Bicep syntax for expressing that is going to look like. But particularly as it relates to, if you've seen the Caramel repo and you've used some of those modules, they take advantage of a lot of these object types, and a lot of your code takes advantage of these object types. And these are difficult to capture in a module because then you kind of lose all the Bicep goodness that you want to check for and express. So this is pretty, I'm personally very excited about it. I'm excited to see what people do with it. So hopefully we get that out soon. For 0.12, obviously throughout the summer, our interns were working on this Bicep parameters file. We presented that on the last 2 community calls, I believe. So you can go back and watch some of that to see what that's shaping up to be. We're gonna finish the work here. It's like 90% done, so we want to get it released out to you so you guys can start playing with it. That's going to be the main thing so far that we have lined up for 0.12. I'm sure there will be other things that we add to that list. And then 1.0 is kind of the same as it's been. I think where there's some news, the AAD provider, I saw a demo of it working end to end this week, which was cool. There are some difficult things with getting this provider done that we're trying to find some shortcuts on. So we really want to get this out to you. We know how much people are anticipating it. So we're doing our best to try to move this up in the timeline, but we'll see. And then passing resources between modules, we're having more discussions on how we can fix these last remaining kind of bugs in getting that release that kind of turned up late in the development process. So we are working on that, and we are working on the build and decompile APIs to support exporting Bicep code and deploying Bicep code in the portal. So hopefully we have some good news to share on that sooner rather than later.
And we have some questions in chat. There was one, what's the differentiation between PS rule and TTK in terms of use cases and MS investment for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to, I personally have not had a ton of conversations with the PS rule team. I think we're open to getting those into the Bicep Linter if it makes sense, and if they're open to making those contributions. I don't know the overlap between PS rule and TTK. I only know that we're trying to get all the TTK stuff into the Bicep Linter, so we can just put all of our energy that would have otherwise gone into the TTK into Bicep linting rules.
Alex, I can give a little update on the PS rule side.
Okay, great.
So PS rule is starting to kind of get more integrated into a tool that's being done by the security folks, which is called Template Analyzer. And so it'll be part of the Defender for DevOps package. And so it's another place that you'll see it surface. It's the same thing, same set of tests. And as part of that migration, they are also picking up all of the TTK tests that are relevant into PS rule. So you can kind of think of it as if you're using Bicep, you should be able to use the Bicep linter for most things, and then Defender for DevOps will start to add some security tests that would be interesting to run on Bicep source as well. And if you're using JSON, then you would do PS rule BPA over the long term. So if you're on Bicep linter is the place to be for the time being. All the relevant tests will be in the Bicep linter. As Defender for DevOps starts to mature and they add more security related tests, those will either make their way into the Bicep linter or they will make their way into a VS Code extension that will run on Bicep files as well. They haven't decided which way that'll go yet, but that's the current plan. It might be kind of confusing, yeah. So if there's any questions, feel free to shout again.
Okay, there's a second question about the roadmap for exporting Bicep natively from Azure Portal for resource templates. Marston had already answered this in chat, but I don't know if Alex, you wanted to touch on it some more.
Yeah, so that last bullet in the bottom right corner of the slide, the build and decompile REST APIs, that's the prerequisite for enabling that in the portal. Our hope is to get those done in like the next 2 months, and then the portal can finish their side of the implementation. And they have been asking us just as much as you guys have been asking us to get these done. So hopefully they will get it done pretty quickly.
Alex.
Oh, my slide did not update. This is the reason why I was 1 minute late, because I was trying to get this slide done. Maybe I can just present it on my side really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to share some of the usage data that we don't really share very often. I personally don't like usage data because I think it gets misconstrued in a lot of different ways, but I think it is worth sharing, especially with you all who are so closely involved with the Bicep community, just kind of where we're at and how active the project has become. So this is total resources deployed. This is something that we pay pretty close attention to. It's a general activity metric of how Bicep is being used in Azure. It's not a perfect metric. It has all sorts of flaws, but at least when you're comparing against yourself, it's pretty good. In May of 2021, which is when we started collecting telemetry in the first place, and was shortly after we shipped 0.3, which was our first production release of Bicep, we were less than 1 million. This is like 900,000 resources deployed in a month. And this month, or this past August, we did 22 million resources deployed in 30 days. That counts creates and updates. So if you're redeploying Bicep file, those resources get counted again because we don't distinguish between creates and updates. But putting all that aside, that's a really impactful number and represents a really significant amount of the declarative deployments in Azure. So all of this just helps continue to feed the beast and add momentum and add resourcing and add energy to the project. And it truly, I know we all say this a lot, but we mean it. It's because you all are posting samples or writing books or posting videos or all of these things that help educate and bring more people into the community and get people involved in the project. So it's really great, especially because we're coming up on a 2-year milestone for the whole project since 0.1. So thought it was good to share some of this out with you all. Do you want to take back over the slides, Stephanie, or do you want me to just finish presenting?
If it's easier for you to finish presenting, please do. But if you want me to take over, I can do that.
I can just quit. Okay. So we have an issue, and we should post the link into the chat as well about default linting rules. I don't know, Stephen, if you wanted to set the context or if Uche is here and wanted to set the context. Otherwise, I'm happy to speak to it.
Either way, Uche, you want me to do it?
I think you got it, Stephen.
Okay. Give me a second to share.
Sorry, Stephen, I just put you on the spot.
Okay, we're good. You can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. This is simply about so far with the linting rules that we've added, we have generally turned them all on by default for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to get feedback. Second, we didn't have enough rules to really be certain of what makes sense as far as that goes, so we just kept it consistent. Now it's time to make some determinations on that, and this is the proposal for that. What I did was I essentially informally broke the rules up into categories. There's nothing currently in the proposal that actually technically breaks them up in any way, but this is just again, this is informal to make decisions on what we want to do, and correctness and security issues generally will be on by default, set to air. Best practices, generally warning, but it depends on how wide of an applicability it has. Portability, we think most of those should probably be off by default. And style set to warning, there may be some exceptions there, like a rule's been proposed that would indicate that params need to be at the top, followed by resources, et cetera. Something like that would definitely be off by default. So here's a list of the current ones we have. Again, the security ones would also be air by default. These will actually cause an error to deployment, so we're setting those to air. And then there's a list of best practice. The best practice ones kind of depend on interpretation. Some of these come from the RMTTK, for instance, and are best practice, but may be annoying to individual developers. But most of those we have set to warning. This is a big example of one that is best practice, but not agreed upon by everybody. So we have that set off by default. These two are likely to cause the most contention, so I'd love to hear on these specifically. I currently suggested leaving them on because they can cause bugs if they're left alone. So you may have, accidentally use different regions. If you use the resource group ID, a location for something that's the default, that doesn't work for all resources. So the best practices are there to keep bugs, but people can certainly turn them off. So that's the first part of it. And that's pretty much the proposal for the moment, is to just keep that simple. But I recognize there might be some other suggestions, especially as to whether some people might want the ability to have the default set to off for all rules and then turn them specifically on, or maybe the other way around, turn them all on by default, specifically set certain ones off, or the ability for warnings to change them all to errors for like pipeline usage. So that was a question there. So essentially at this point, are there any comments or questions or concerns? We'd love to hear about them now.
And I'll put a link in the chat if people want to add their comments to the issue.
Yep, feel free to. Please add suggestions. Otherwise, we'll implement this in the probably the next milestone.
And just to, does someone have a question?
Uh-huh.
I was just thinking someone had a question. So what I wanted to mention was, so you mentioned a good idea that comes from this sort of categorization and breakdown is being able to group turn certain linter rules on, and like in a group turn some of them off, or in a group set them to a certain level. So I thought that was a really good idea. Again, in that feedback that any of y'all choose to go to, I think, did we paste this issue in the chat yet? I'm on mobile, so I'm not able to.
We did.
Okay, sick. So for any of y'all that want to just take a look at it, just kind of putting yourself in the experience of what are the groupings that make the most sense to group turn off or group turn on, or be able to set to warning, error, etc. And then which rules would you do you want, this is also a issue where you can definitely go ahead and change, you know, or ask for a request changing the default setting right now of any of the rules. So if any of the rules are irking you, or if any of the rules for your team you think actually should be seen as error level, etc., just like feel free to talk to us about it. Make it a discussion.
Cool. Any other thoughts, questions, comments about this one?
Should we open a separate issue for the discussion about rules on which level they should be categorized? Or because the issue you mentioned earlier was about mechanism, right?
But you can add suggestions to that same bug as to the default level.
Ah, okay, great, thanks.
Cool. Stephanie, do you want me to present the last slide, the interview slide?
Sure. Okay, so yeah, so this is something that I brought up a few months ago. Bicep feedback interviews. We've had some good interviews so far. Very, very helpful learnings. So thank you to those who we have interviewed. I think I see some people in this call. We really appreciate you. But we do want to have some more interviews just to get more feedback. So please, if you can sign up, that'd be great. And we are looking for like different types of customers. So I'm sorry if you did sign up and we haven't reached out yet. We're trying to get as much of a breadth as possible. Yeah, I'll put this link in chat, and yeah, please sign up. Thank you.
Cool, and I think we have the rest of the time, 37 minutes if we need it, for any questions you have. So it's August, it was a quiet month. There's lots of people on vacation, at least on the Bicep team, I'm sure across all of your teams as well. But if there's any open questions, feel free to put them in chat or to come off mute and ask away. I think there's a discussion about API versions, but I think Marcin has been covering it. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Any exciting summer vacations that people are going on?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
I sadly missed the last community call, but I was wondering, has there been any more progress about being able to pass a symbolic like resource into a module, so we don't have to say create a module for like every single RBAC permission? If we're trying to scope that out, we can just say, hey, here's the existing reference, just go pass it through, or something like that, or even pass a symbolic resource out of a module.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
So we don't have to do like we don't have to do existing blocks for every child resource. Is probably the big thing that this leads towards.
right. We are making progress on that slowly. There's an issue with there's a bug that we just didn't realize we were going to hit when we were implementing it. So we basically got done with the whole thing and then hit this kind of gnarly runtime bug that we're trying to figure out how to fix most effectively. And it's not a straightforward answer. So we need a little more time on that than we would have liked. It will definitely be part of, it's part of our kind of 1.0 release gate, but I don't have a more precise ETA than like 2 to 4 months, I would say.
Okay.
I don't know if Ben Wilkinson is here, but he has a very clever workaround where he uses an ARM template as a module instead of a Bicep file as a module, and basically has it coded up to to do what you're describing specifically for role assignments. If someone happens to know about that workaround or has a link, otherwise I can try to find it as well.
Okay.
And we're even, if people think it's useful and mostly safe to use, we could even put it in the public module registry. I wouldn't necessarily be against that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying that for sure.
Okay, I'll try to find it.
Actually, again, our holdover would be from last one. Is there any documentation, excuse me, around using Bicep for Helm in Kubernetes?
Using Bicep to deploy Helm in Kubernetes, like on the Kubernetes control plane.
Yeah, because I know that's something that got brought up in like, hey, we're driving towards that. I didn't know if that has progressed and if there's any documentation around that yet.
It's not released yet. I think it'll be released in the next month or so. So at that time, we will definitely have documentation and kind of do a thorough overview in the community call. And for what it's worth, it's going to only be Kubernetes to start. So Helm is going to be something that we have to work on separately. But we are aware of it, and we do agree that it needs to be done.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Austin?
Yeah, since we have a little time, I had a question about recommendations for improving IntelliSense on like module outputs.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using it for like environment configuration, passing in a string, and then using the nifty array output to be able to say, I pass in DV, I'm going to get the object parameters for the develop environment, or PD for production. But when I'm actually passing that down to my various submodules that I've created, I'm having both screens up in front of me and just making sure that I have the type correct. Goes down maybe 2 layers, and then once you get to like the 3rd or 4th, it's not surprisingly the compiler starts having issues. Wasn't sure if you had recommendations for improving that, or if that's something that's already known. Maybe I can put an issue together to make a little more sense rather than just talking about it.
If you have a repro, it would be helpful. We have an issue about strong typing, and this feels related to that.
Okay.
So I'll try to find that, or if Johnny is around and has the link handy.
Sure. Yeah, I think I actually have an example ready that I've been using for some other interested parties. So I'll just put something together and put it on the issues list.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean, we are working on expanding kind of what's expressible with the type system. So what you're describing sounds like an example where we lose type information by putting it in an output, because you can just say it's an array. You can't say it's an array of a specific set of types. So
right.
We should be resolving that, but I want to make sure we are.
Yeah, in my instance, it's not so much the type, because I'm just mostly passing around SKUs and environment specific, a B1 VM in the develop environment versus whatever in prod.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm less concerned about the type, and it's more so I just didn't know, with those layerings. But yeah, I'll create something that'll be easier for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions?
I also have a question regarding the Carmel module repository and what the future is for the Bicep registry modules and the Carmel modules, and if they will be merged, and if not, how they will exist besides each other in the future.
Yeah, so the Carmel project is a project that kind of started as a field effort, where the sales field of Microsoft kind of has that as assets that they're ready to go with for new customer engagements. We are in the process of doing a couple things with that team. One is making sure they're properly resourced to maintain a code library like that over time. So if we were to make it part of the Bicep module registry, there's kind of a statement of support behind that code, and we want to make sure we can support that kind of first and foremost. In parallel, we want to make sure we're kind of on the same page on coding standards and things like that and the types of code that we want written. So we're working through some of those challenges, and the work around custom types is intertwined with that discussion. So Carmel uses that object parameter pattern very extensively, and it just completely breaks down in Bicep module usage because you don't know what the types of those objects should be. So we're kind of seeing the custom types work as a prerequisite to aligning all of that work. So
right, I was also working a little bit.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
You're good.
Go on. Yeah, I was just saying I was also working on some like PRs and issues on that repository, and like you said, the type inference issue is definitely one, and also for testing, it would be great if we could switch to like Bicep parameter files sometimes in the future, so to have the whole tooling in a native Bicep and don't have so much to deal with JSON templates in between or JSON parameter files or something like that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think the goal is to align on the CI process, the contribution model, the where it is in the Bicep registry. So I'm optimistic that we can get something, but I don't know exactly when. I just, it's very important we do it in the right way and not rush it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of this in terms of the new extensibility features that will launch sometime in the future. So that for new people that will be coming to the Bicep ecosystem, especially, so I expected that much more people will come to the Bicep ecosystem as soon as we have extensibility for external modules. So I think when that happens, there should be like some kind of central repository to not confuse the people that are not as deeply into this ecosystem as we all are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this will all get resolved before we have some of the early extensibility work, to be honest. Carmel
Yeah, just
is
before GA would be fine, right?
Yeah. I mean, Carmel is not, it's not something that comes from the product group, and it doesn't mean use it, it doesn't mean don't use it. But when it comes to what we're kind of standing behind and supporting, it's the module registry, and where there's other code out there that's useful, you know, we don't have a problem with you using that, but they should be marketing that accordingly.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Greg has a question about AD and Bicep. So that's another 1.0 thing that we're eagerly anticipating. So some of us got to see a demo of it working this week, which was exciting. There's some fundamental blockers that we need to resolve before, even if it's done, we can actually release it. So we're working through that. We're trying to get it done as fast as possible and come up with some shortcuts, but no clear ETAs on that either. But it will happen. Any other questions? Okay. Unless anyone wants to share their summer vacation plans, I think we can wrap up early. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.